Okay, ladies, so we're going to do something a little bit different today, as you can tell. We're having a panel discussion from some of the more experienced women. I was going to use the other word. More experienced women, not older women, just more experienced women in the room, because we're supposed to do that. God has designed the elders among us to teach us about God and wisdom from their own experiences. This is biblical. Psalm 71. Starting verse 15, my mouth will tell of your righteous deeds, of your savings acts all day long. Though I know not how to relate them all, I will come and proclaim your mighty acts, sovereign Lord. I will proclaim your righteous deeds, yours alone. Since my youth, God, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds. Even when I am old and gray, do not forsake me, my God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your mighty acts to all who are to come. So as you guys get older, this will be your commission. This will be your job to pass on the mighty deeds of the Lord. And God, of course, has designed parents to pass on to their children wisdom for life, but also revelation about God. This is Proverbs chapter 6, starting at verse 20. My son, I guess we could say my daughter as well, keep your father's command and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them always on your heart. Fasten them around your neck. When you walk, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will speak to you. For this command is a lamp. This teaching is a light. And correction and instruction are the way to life. Now, some of you, like me, did not have parents who were exactly strong followers of the Lord growing up. Some of you may not have really been taught a whole lot by your parents. And that's why mentoring is so important, and that is also a biblical concept. Titus 2, you knew I was going to go there for just a quick second, and then we'll get to our panel discussion, but Titus 2, starting in verse 3, likewise teach the older women, that's us, sorry, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. So mentoring is a biblical concept, and that's a little bit what we're going to do today in our panel discussion. So I want to introduce our illustrious panel today. I have a little bit of their, I just thought I used a big word, our illustrious panel. And I'll tell you just a little bit of the backstory for each one. We won't go into a lot of detail, but Denise has been married 29 years. She has 3 kids, ages 23 to 27. Her oldest child she brought into the marriage to Fritz, but they have 3 kids now. Corey, married 35 years, 7 kids. Ages 20 through 32, and she looks marvelous for 7 kids, which just sounded like, oh my gosh, I couldn't do that. Diane, down here, was married 4 years initially, then divorced, then married 13 years, then divorced, now married 30 years, woo! With 3 biological children, ages 46 to 59. And Susan, she takes the award for the most years, 50 years this summer.
Wow.
50 years this summer, 2 children, 45 and 46. Susan, you might not recognize because in the past she came to our Thursday night group, and she's kind of a snowbird, so she's sort of in and out. But she's blessing us with her presence today. And then me, for those of you who don't know me, I was married 18 years initially, got divorced, then married again, and that was 16 and a half years until he passed away, and now I've been married a whole whopping almost 3 months. Wow, much experience in that marriage. So I'm going to ask some questions of all of you, and as you want to answer, just kind of raise your hand and I'll pass the mic to you, and then you guys can be busy scribbling some questions if you have a question that you've been dying to ask anonymously. So here's the first one. What have you learned about growing and maintaining a strong walk with the Lord that you wished you would have known earlier in your life? Would anyone like to take a run at that one? Something you've learned. Okay. There you go.
I think what I really learned over time is that the commands that God gave us are not burdensome. And that's in 1 John, that his commands are not burdensome. But they're designed to keep us from the consequences of sin. And it doesn't keep us from the consequences of other sins against us necessarily, but you can help prevent the shame and the guilt from making bad decisions as you're closer to God. And I wish I had known that and realized that a lot sooner, both as a child and in my marriage.
Anyone else? Susan?
Just quickly, I think for me, the biggest thing is just developing my personal relationship with God in the quietness of a daily time with Him, meeting time with Him in His Word.
Diane? If you don't volunteer, I will call on you.
I can see that coming. I wish I had God's mind instead of my own. I would have never had the 3 marriages. I would have had the 1, and I would too have been at 57 years. But I didn't meet Him until later on, and I'm grateful when I did finally meet Him and get Him into my life. So it's been quite a different and lovely and gracious relationship with the Lord and I, finally.
How about Denise? Dying to talk.
Can you say the question one more time?
What have you learned about growing and maintaining a strong walk with the Lord that you wish you would have known earlier? About growing and maintaining a strong walk with the Lord.
Well, I agree with what the 3 of you have said. I actually, when my husband and I decided to get married, we started talking about, because neither one of us were attending a church and we weren't walking with the Lord. So we decided to go to a pastor and talk to him about getting married, and we did some premarital counseling and started attending that church. I wish that I had done it sooner, but the enemy had put up blinders, and I didn't even know it. So looking back, I wish that I had known the Lord and walked with Him my whole life, but I didn't grow up in a church home. But since then, that day one, we have really tried to grow in our relationship with Christ.
And for me, I feel like you guys heard from me so much, like I'm a broken record. But for me, I think one of the pivotal things that helped me to grow stronger and stay in a stronger relationship is when it finally dawned on me that prayer is where it's at, and that praying, I don't know why it took me probably like 20 years of my Christian walk before I went, praying would probably be a really good thing, not a chore, but maybe like I could actually go to the God of the universe who, I'm reading the Bible and He's pretty powerful, so maybe I should be praying more. And then when I started really praying for specific things, even just like practical things, and then I saw God answering, and I started writing them down in my now famous God Sightings journal. It's like, that just my faith just skyrocketed when I started really praying about everything and noting His answers to prayer, because that built my faith so much to see the answers to prayer. Not that He answered every single prayer exactly how I wanted, but He was definitely moving, and that was pretty exciting. Okay, next question. What was the toughest challenge in your marriage, or for some of us, marriages? What was the toughest challenge, and how did you work through it?
Okay, I'll grab it.
I need
Being married for 50 years, we've had a lot of challenges, but really we brought challenges into our marriage, and it is only by God's grace and His miracles in our lives that we have survived as long as we have. Because I brought sexual sin baggage into the marriage, and he did too, and it took us a long time to work through it. And I've invited Barb Curry, sitting at the back table. She has to leave in a few minutes, but one of the pivotal things for me unraveling my past, recovering from an abortion that regrettably the decision I made to have an abortion before we were married, that traumatic experience for me, it just did a lot of damage in our relationship. And then couple that with the sexual sin stuff that my husband brought into the marriage, we were just a disaster. But the Lord has been faithful to work through it all. He makes miracles out of our messes, and he really has. But a large part of that for me was a friend telling me about an after-abortion care ministry that, like 18 years after the abortion, I heard about this ministry that, I mean, sexual sin is so shameful and secretive that people just don't talk about it unless the Lord says, I want you to talk about it. And he has done that to me, and he's kind of kept me in this ministry. But being in an after-abortion care group with other women who have experienced that trauma, the Lord really worked miracles in that. So how does that answer that? Toughest challenge is working through the sexual sin, the consequences of sexual sin, my own and then my husband's too.
And not to park you overly long here, but how did you work through that? What was the key, if you were to look back and say, what was the key that brought you through so that you could work through all the damage from the sexual sin?
Well, just relying on the Lord's guidance and wisdom that you gain from a group like this. This is part of it too. I mean, working through my husband's sexual sin, part of that was coming to SOS and putting on my combat boots instead of my toe shoes, you know, and combating the sexual sin that was still happening in our marriage. But it's hard to do that in isolation.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you are keeping secrets and you're not willing to be honest and vulnerable with other people, and especially people if they've kind of walked down that road ahead of you, then they can be of help. The Lord uses them.
Yes, absolutely.
And he does it.
But he does the work, but it's good to be in community for sure.
Yeah.
Who else would like to take a run at the biggest challenge in your marriage and how you work through it? Ooh, Denise.
The biggest challenge for us was parenting. And I was a single mom and came into our marriage with a child, and she was already sick, so it wasn't like she was an infant. She had some issues, and my husband grew up in a home that was strong on discipline, and so we struggled. I struggled because I had been a single parent, and I couldn't wait to find a mate that was ready to be a dad, and he was, but yet he wasn't. He didn't know what to do any more than any of us do when we become a parent. And so we learned a lot through him being a step-parent, and we decided to take a parenting class and get to be able to be on the same page. We took several parenting classes, and one of them was called Growing Kids God's Way. I don't even believe it's a class anymore. I'm not sure, but we took it with other couples, and the other couples we also grew to become good friends with. We went to church with them. We formed strong bonds raising our kids and held each other accountable. But that was the biggest challenge in our marriage, was raising kids. And we're empty nesters now, and we have
You made it!
grandkids, and now trying to pass on things to our grandkids. And it's hard when our grown kids aren't walking with the Lord and aren't raising their kids, in the way of the Lord. So, yeah, we overcame it by reaching out to Christ and Jesus and relying on Him to give us the wisdom and the knowledge. And He did.
Awesome. Diane?
I think stepkids is probably the most undeserving, hard, awful thing that you can have. My second marriage, had 4, and combined with my 3. So it was a big house, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was the stepchildren are manipulating, and they're just kids. They're just like any other kids. So it was a real problem in our marriage because he had never really stood up and defended me or allowed me to have a position of taking care of things like I thought I wanted to. Anyway, and then of course I was painted as the evil stepmother to the kid's mother. So it was crazy, crazy time. So I just finally backed off and just stopped. And that was my wisdom. And I was a Christian at the time, and I just loved them. I just loved them and stopped trying to be an authority figure in their lives. And that worked out. That worked out better than anything.
Interesting.
Corey?
All of these things that they've shared, the sexual sin that we brought into our marriage was an issue, but what had come to my mind when she brought it up was financial issues have been a big deal in our home. My husband was doing hardwood floors when we married, and then eventually he ended up owning his own hardwood flooring business, and it was quite a season for 20 plus years that he did that, and it worked out, but I was always fretting and always worrying about money and worrying about how I was spending money and just spending so much time trying to control things in that arena that it was really tough. And it is still, it's not simple, but I finally reached the point where I didn't want to fret and worry about it anymore, and got a little bit more obedient to God's command to tithe and to trust Him, and you really start to see where God really does open up His storehouses, and abundance flows from crazy places. Things happen that shouldn't happen. One time, my 4-year-old son put our van into the neighbor's house. I don't recommend it. It's not a fun experience. But through it, we really truly saw God's blessing in incredible ways. Number one, it should have cost us a lot of money. It didn't cost us a penny. Somehow, everything that should have cost us money, the bill never came. And that's just a miracle from God. Everything got fixed. They should never have repaired our car. It was definitely totaled. And they repaired our van. So that's just one of the stories. And I was able to be in the house and just be, besides not being able to decide whether you're supposed to put your shoes on when you're going out to your car that's in your neighbor's house. That was my biggest decision. Shoes on, shoes off. How do I get there? I just saw God's blessing in the fact that, one, He protected. There were 3 children in the car that my son got going down the driveway. And all of the things that could have happened is if you see the path, it could have gone in the ditch and it would have tipped over. It could have gone, it should have tipped over in another spot, but no, it went straight through a set of trees, straight into the corner, the most foundational support of the house. Otherwise, it probably would have gone straight through the house. So all these things, you just see God's hand, that even though it seems like such a tragedy, God's hand was still in it. But that was one of the financial things, besides the fact that we've never done without. I have a very generous father and parents that always took us to do things we shouldn't have done. And so we just were blessed in ways that we didn't anticipate. And I didn't learn to appreciate it for a long time. And then, of course, the other one was parenting. We had 7 kids, and we've done we just did the car in the neighbor's house, the child that falls out of a tree with a bat in his mouth, and in theory, that child, same child, by the way. And when we got to the hospital to find out that had he really done as serious damage as he could have done having an injury like that, we would never have made it to the hospital. But we got to the hospital. I have 5 children that are 8 and under, and what do? I have to go in the emergency room with a 3 or 4-year-old, and the rest have to sit in the waiting room. And miraculously, they did, and they didn't tear the place apart. They didn't disappear. They were very capable. So at that point, I had 5 children, and you're just, in God's hands, and a friend comes, but all the things with parenting between trying to determine what activities they should do, how are they going to be schooled, what church activities are you going to do, what are your priorities in your family. That has definitely been the toughest decision and for us. And we just really, because we're on the other side of it. Our youngest is 20, and some have graduated from high school, some have not. I think one might have two have college degrees at AA levels. They're all productive, employed people. And we just had to trust God. And at this point, we just know it was just perseverance for Matt and I. And just that we didn't quit. It's not that we didn't want to quit, because we didn't agree a lot. And I'm probably the stronger of the personalities. Matt's more laid back and even going. If my kids have manners, because my husband taught them to them, not because I did. And we joke about that all the time. They say please or thank you, it's because their dad taught them. But we just really didn't quit. And it is that total perseverance in God. And we've not followed God. We weren't in a healthy relationship with God when we married. It took until I had my first child for me to go, wow, this is miraculous. I want this child to know Jesus. And I mean, it was like that quick. From I don't want a baby to he's born and, oh, this child needs to know Jesus. And so that's what I started pursuing. And my husband's the good guy. He's just his spiritual walk is more on a leisurely pace, but he's strong in it, and we can rely on him.
Let's go to a different question about marriage before we move on to parenting, because I sense we could do a lot of parenting discussion up here. So, talking about marriage, what have you learned about protecting your marriage and keeping it healthy? So a little bit of a different twist, protecting your marriage and keeping it healthy. Anyone want to jump in, Diane?
You really have to watch the people around. But especially when you're in the ministry, you really have to pay attention to the women that are around, because they're are just wonderful, sweet women that just need a savior, and often it's not Jesus. So my husband and I had made an agreement that he needed to be careful and always have the door open when you're counseling, just basic stuff like that. Men don't seem to think about that too much, but women do, and that is a real protection that you have to have for your husband.
Protecting your marriage, pray for your husband, pray for yourself, and pray for your marriage. That's key. And that what you were talking about, prayer. I think God is the one who changes hearts, and if there is something going on that shouldn't be going on, I think you kind of trust your gut, even if you don't know what's going on. And that's what was good. That's in confronting my husband's sexual sin. It was hidden, well hidden for a long time. And so, when you don't know what you don't know how to fight it. But you trust your gut, and you find your combat boots, even if you don't think they're in the house. You look for them. You find community and places like this.
I'm an investigator.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So.
And I'll take a run at this one, maybe from two different angles. One is, some of you know my story. A big lesson that I learned is never work in very, very close, tight partnership with another man who is not your husband, because the enemy will use that to try to draw you into connection and a bond with that person, especially if you're working as a team, and that's the trap that I fell into in my first marriage. So do everything you can to, if you have to work in tight partnership with another man, just you and him as a team, be super careful, because it is a bonding thing, and you'll end up sharing how your day is, how your week is, how your life is, how your marriage is, and pretty soon it's like, well, this person totally understands me. I think I'm in love with this person, which is just a delusion. But the second thing I thought about in terms of protecting marriage is I am a conflict avoider, a recovering conflict avoider, but that will kill a marriage if you just stuff everything and you just have resentment building. That will slowly kill off your marriage just as sure as having an affair or something. So I've learned to address issues, even though I don't want to. With every fiber of my being, I do not want to bring up anything, but I've learned I have to, because otherwise I'll start to grow resentful, and that will slowly squeeze the life out of your marriage.
I would say realistic expectations for my husband. I did not have realistic expectations for his behaviors, and he wasn't bad. I just wanted him to be something different.
Kind of like Jesus?
Yeah, a little bit. And I also think how I communicate with him, I need to keep my conversations to the point and not tell him every single detail, because he just doesn't care. He doesn't care that much. He cares to know, but the details are a little bit too much. And I just need to keep it simple, stupid.
Everything?
The question
Right,
again?
protecting your marriage?
Protecting my marriage. Well, definitely prayer. I haven't always, quite honestly, I've learned a lot from coming to SOS, from Debbie, from this ministry. My husband he's an amazing man, and sometimes I think I don't deserve him, but God put him in my life, and I know it was a God thing. But because I came into our marriage with a lot of baggage and pretty messed up, and my husband has put up with me, but I try to meet his needs. And I say try because I don't always meet his needs, and my husband isn't very good about telling me what his needs are. And so it's kind of like asking for directions when you're with a man or with your husband. They don't ask. And so he doesn't tell me, and I've always just tried to read him. But he gets really grumpy, and we tend to not see eye to eye when his needs aren't met. And whether that be keeping a clean home, taking care of the kids. I made a huge mistake when our kids were younger. He would come in the door, and I would unload on him and about my day, because he would ask about my day. And he really did want to know all those things that happened throughout the day, because he had his own stuff. A man, they have a lot to shoulder. And so I've learned through the years that he just wanted me to show up at the door with a smile on my face, ready to, like a puppy dog, happy to see him. Send the kids in to say, "Oh, Dad, we're so glad you're home." And they did, but it took time to get there for me to realize that, like I said, I tried to meet his needs. We have dinner. My husband is so faithful. He's home at the same time every night. When he's not, something's up. And we always had dinner at the same time. I had dinner practically on the table. Just did everything. I was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of years, and so God allowed me to do that. And I never dreamed that life could be like that, but it was. God is faithful.
Awesome.
Let's go to parenting, because some of you probably would like to know about that. What is something you would have done differently in raising your children now that you are older and wiser? Is there anything you look back and go, there was probably a better way to go about dealing with something with the children? Anyone have a thought?
Don't jump too far forward in the future over the experiences your children are having. Just do right now. Don't get fearful because they make a bad decision or they fail at something. Let them fail. Success comes from their failures, especially if we can back off enough to let them experience it now in that moment. Otherwise, they'll carry it forward, and that's my experience from my daughter who went through addiction and we're really fortunate and we're really blessed, because honestly, I know people who are 40 years and they're still struggling, and we got our daughter back in 6. So we definitely jumped to conclusions of fear when she experimented with drugs, and it just seemed to spiral it, not stop it. And also not living for the approval of others, because as she was going through this, we're a Christian family and our daughter's doing drugs, and the shame and trying to reach out, but also trying to hide it at the same time, and trying to find help, but not really knowing where to go for that. Now I know I would use groups like this. The school system was not a good place for help for us. And I got some good counsel. The good counsel for me was, they are not me, and I am not them. They have to live their own experiences. They have to live their own lives. And I can't expect them to experience their experiences the way I would feel through them. And that was a huge freeing moment for me, because I needed to let them go and experience the things. And it took a lot of years, but both of my daughters, who I struggled parenting my daughters. And they are my favorite people, my best friends now.
That's so awesome.
On this side, anything you would have done differently in raising your children?
I had the opportunity to have my first ones when I was 21, and so I raised them as I grew up. And I didn't really take the time to appreciate all the things, all the times of change. And then my son, I was in my 30s, and I was able to sit back and watch him and be delighted in all of the things that they do. It was an entirely different experience. And the only thing I can say is that maybe we should have our children when we're older rather than when we're younger.
But then we don't have enough energy.
Not too old, you better be.
Do you have anything, Susan? Comes to mind? If not, that's okay.
No, that's okay.
I'll just share a couple little things that I wish I would have done differently. One of them was, I think I've shared this before, but I would get up in the morning really early to read my Bible before my kids got up and my husband got up, so that I could be undisturbed and read my Bible. Doesn't that seem like a very holy and spiritual thing to do?
Absolutely.
Of course, except for my kids never saw me read the Bible, because I did it before they got up. And so I years and years later, when they were well into their adult years, I was talking once about, my daily Bible reading. They were like, "You don't read the Bible?" I'm like, "I read the Bible every day." "No, you don't. We've never seen you read the Bible." Well, I guess that's true. So I just wish I would have been more, had my faith more in front of them so they could see me walk it out. And then along that same line, I wish I would have talked to my kids more about God throughout the day. Just bringing Bible principles into everyday life. Instead of just saying, well, yeah, that's kind of a Sunday activity that we take the kids to church. And I wish I would have really incorporated what I was learning from God and talking with them about all of those lessons along the way. Okay, the last question that we have planned anyway is, if you could give one piece of advice to young moms, what would it be?
Okay, I'll give the advice that I got from a friend when I was first a mom was, don't wish the time away. Be where your feet are with your kids. Don't wish them to be, oh, I can't wait till they can crawl or walk or talk or whatever. But just enjoy every moment, because it really does go fast. And I took that to heart, and I did enjoy my kids, and I think that's one of the reasons we have such a good relationship today, despite the problems of the collateral damage of, because Raymond and I were having such trouble in the marriage. They experienced that too, but I had a strong enough relationship with them, and he did too, that they survived the the carnage of what was going on in the marriage, and we still have good relationships with them as adults, even though they have experienced damage from the damage that we endured.
Here, anyone? One bit of advice you'd give a young mom?
I was thinking about this on the way in, because I think that's the question that Debbie posed to us when she asked us to be on the panel. And one of the things that came to mind were the finances. My husband and I never struggled with finances because we lived within our means. And I knew that because I was a single mom for a lot of years, and I had no one to depend on but me. My parents did help us out at one point. They gave us a loan to buy our first refrigerator, and my dad kept a ledger and charged us interest even just like a bank loan. And so we learned from that. We learned to live within our means. And I know not everybody's fortunate enough to do that. We came into the marriage, my husband had already destroyed his credit in his college days, so he had very little credit. He came into the marriage with his junk car that he wouldn't even take me on a date in. We took my car on our first date, and subsequent dates. I signed up for a program before I met my husband, and it was to build a home, and it's called Whatcom Skagit Self-Help Homes, I believe. I'm not positive, but signed up for that, and it took a couple of years. I was on the waiting list, prayed a lot. I know God had his hand totally in this, because I was supposed to build a house in the Birch Bay area, and it fell through, and I was devastated. I thought, what am I going to do? And then I ended up building in Ferndale. My husband, we didn't know each other. We met like a month before I started the project, and he lived a block away from where I was building the house, and he just happened to be a framer. He just happened to be in construction. It's like he came out faithfully pretty much every weekend and helped me build my house. And when so for years we struggled with that, because it was, my house. I had a purple house, a pink house, and now it's normal color. But God had his hand on us the whole time. We were able to pay our hospital bills after having kids, and we've never ever, we've always been provided for. We, had a decent car. I was able to stay home for all those years, and we made it, we made it happen, or God made it happen. So financially, live within your means.
I'd also, once again, it's praying first.
Yeah.
Pray first. Seek God second. Then deal with everything else. Just find his wisdom, because that's what will make you complete. That was when the whole world is swirling in chaos. God doesn't change. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it is the only thing you can hang on to. Your kids will go through experiences that you can't experience them exactly with them. There's a very careful boundary between enabling and encouraging and supporting, and it is a very tricky balance. I know in my situation, I found someone who walked alongside. Find support. Do not walk alone through any experience, no matter how you think someone may treat you because of what you're going through. Find a trusted person, a wiser person. It's not always an older person. Interview young people. You'll get a lot of good information, because they don't all think alike. There are some really great young people out there. I got some great advice from my kids' friends, and just talking to them. So yeah, that's what that would be the advice. Just pray first, seek God, and trust him. Trust he has a great plan. I had to believe that God loved my daughter more than I ever could, and that whatever happened, that he wanted to use it for his glory. If she lived, it was for his glory. If she didn't, there would still be a way that God would be glorified through the experiences she went through. Right now we're on this, she is living for his glory.
I just wanted to say, when my youngest guy was like 3, I was just terrified for his safety. And I remember one night I just knelt by his bed, he was sleeping, and I just gave him to the Lord and put him on the altar. And it not only relieved my fears, but when he turned 16 and started driving, I knew I'd already given him to the Lord. He was already on the altar, and it gave me a lot of peace that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Okay, I'll just finish up by saying one thing that occurred to me that a bit of advice I would give to a young mom, and this might seem counterintuitive because we're talking about parenting, but my bit of advice would be fight like the Dickens to keep your marriage intact.
Absolutely.
Because kids can make it through a divorce, but it leaves huge scars. It can affect them in really profound ways. So do everything you possibly can to fight to keep your marriage intact. Go to counselors, pray like crazy, do all the, stop being a conflict avoider, all the things, but try to keep your marriage intact because that will bless your children more than so many other things, more than having, great vacations and excelling in sports and all the things that we're like, oh, let's do that. Keeping your marriage intact would be like one of the very biggest blessings that you could give to your kids.
Amen.
Are there any questions in the baskets? I don't even know. We're probably out of time. Or do we have questions? Do we have one question? It's like Vanna White, but not really. Because she's not turning any letters.
Well, I should have done my hair then.
Sarah's right here.
Oh, good. Yes, that's true. Okay, when you and your husband are not in agreement about something, how do you work through that and still submit to him? How do you lean on God and trust him through the process?
Can you read it again?
Yeah. When you and your husband are not in agreement about something, how do you work through that and still submit to him?
Pray that God changes his mind.
You hear that? Diane said, pray that God changes his mind so that he agrees with you. Duh, yeah. That is kind of an interesting question. I have some thoughts, but you guys have some thoughts? Want to chime in on that one?
Pause.
Pause. Okay. Consult God, see what he might have to say about the whole thing. Yeah. I'm going through this right now, oddly enough. I'm not even quite 3 months into my new marriage. It's like, we've lived a lot of decades of life, so we have 2 different ways of doing just about everything because we've lived so much of life and have so much experience under our belts. And so it's been very interesting, like, why don't you do it my way? My way is right. Like, that's how I think. And there's this one area where we are not in agreement at all, and I finally have had to lay that on the altar. And it's like, you know what, this is not a hill to die on, we're not going over a cliff, and so Lord, I'm going to submit to you in this. It doesn't feel very comfortable, especially when you know you're right. Really, it doesn't feel very comfortable. But unless we're going over a cliff and someone's going to be physically harmed, like, okay, I'm going to submit in this, I'm just going to trust you, Lord, that you can pick up the pieces here if this doesn't quite work out. So that's how I'm approaching it. How do you take care of yourself when the kids are at home and you work outside the house?
Good sleep.
Good sleep. When are you going to do that? I don't know how many kids you have. How do you take care of yourself when the kids are at home and you work outside the house? Anyone want to answer that one? You had 7 kids.
Well, when I was raising my kids, I didn't go to work until, so I've been 9 years at Fred Meyer's and I worked 4 years before that. And so I homeschooled my kids before that. And I guess I didn't consider their success to be based upon all of the academic achievements or their athletic achievements or those things. Because in homeschooling, I learned the idea that when they really want to know something, they will learn it. So I didn't get all caught up in the details of them getting every lesson done or doing a specific schooling. And so you just take the time and decide what hills are you going to die on. And most of it, I just know now that it worked out, and they're pretty easygoing people as opposed to being constantly stressed by things. And so by not putting the pressure on in every area, because eventually everything explodes. It's all going to explode if there's all this pressure. You got to do school, you got to do athletics, you got to do, mom's working, and you have all these schedules going on. You just have to carve it out, just like you would anything else, and you have to just stop. You really have to stop and find it. I don't really know where you will, but you just have to stop. And one of the things I learned is asking God to make whatever time you have, make it enough. If it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, He multiplies things. God is the multiplier. Five fish, 2 loaves fed 5,000. So why can't 5 minutes give you the sustenance for 5 hours and refresh you if you really go to Him and call upon Him? Make what I have right now absolutely enough to get me through the experience that I have before me.
That's good, and I think that's a good way to end our little panel discussion. Thank you very much.